Yep.
And call ourselves to order. Thank you.
We have a deceptively light agenda, but it won't be light. Thank you all for being here. I want to welcome my colleagues on the City Commission, as well as the members of the Plan Board. And for some of you, I think it's either your first or your second meeting. So thank you for being here. Thank you, staff and community, for being a part of this as well. Madam Clerk.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have the adoption of the agenda, which the Commission will adopt their agenda first, and then the City Plan Board will adopt theirs.
Do you have any motions on the City Commission?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda as distributed. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we have an agenda, Madam Clerk.
Right.
Mr. Chair.
Plan Board?
Madam, if you would call our roll for us.
Yes.
I would like to add that Stephanie Sutton's blind dog has been lost all day, and she just found it. She'll be about 20 minutes
Oh,
late.
good. I was going to ask her about that. Good.
All right, the roll for the City Plan Board: Robert Ackerman,
Here.
Jamie Bell. Here. Tina Certain. Nicholas Hill.
Here.
Joshua May.
Here.
Jason Sanchez.
Here.
Stephanie Sutton. And Julie.
Thank you. As I said, our member Stephanie Sutton will be here shortly. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda, please?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, for those of you who may not have been here for a while, or just want to be reminded, if you would like to speak to the item on the agenda when we get to that point, please fill out a comment card and pass it over to Mr. Carl over here, and we'll get you on the list. And when it comes that time, you will see a series of lights in front of you, and this is for folks watching at home too, for when the day that you come down here. You will see a series of lights. As long as the light is green, you have plenty of time to talk. When it turns yellow, we'll think about winding down, and when it turns red, I'm about to ask you to wind up. It's a total of 3 minutes, but we've been giving people a reasonable opportunity to finish up what you're saying, and that is the general system. So tonight we're going to talk about, we'll go ahead and introduce the item, Madam Clerk, and then I have a couple comments before we move on to staff.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have 2023-794 Comprehensive Plan Update, with the recommendation that the City Commission and City Plan Board discuss the update of the comprehensive plan, enact the GNV, and if necessary, provide direction to staff on the next steps to complete the comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So I'll note that this is a workshop for both the commission and for the Plan Board. That means we can't vote on anything. So anyone who is concerned that we might be just pushing this thing into action, that's not the case. What we're doing is getting an update on the draft of the very ambitious update to the city's comprehensive plan. And I want to tell you a few things about that, having had some conversations today. First of all, the comprehensive plan is not under a deadline to be finished and turned in to Tallahassee. We have time to finish a document that we can all be proud of and that we can move forward with, that will stand for another decade or so. We are under, again, no pressure from the state of Florida to finish this up and push things through. We want to make sure that it is a good document. I want to be sure that it is, and this is different than we've done in the past. I want to be sure that it's a document that is accessible to the community, that is accessible to people who are not necessarily land use attorneys or planning professionals. We need land use and planning professionals to also be comfortable with it, but there should be at least a portion of this that is in regular people language, the sort of thing that you could look at and say, I kind of understand where you're going with that, without having to close the door to your home office and shut everything else out for several hours to try to figure it out if you're not a planning professional. Because let's face it, that's what you have to do now. If you are not a planning professional and you're trying to achieve something with the current comprehensive plan or one of the many comprehensive plans, the hundreds of them throughout Florida, you're going to end up having to pay somebody to get work done. I would like for that not to always be the case. And therefore, my hope is that this will be a more accessible document than what we have used in the past. At any rate, that's kind of where we're going with this. I wanted to address a couple of things that have been brought up by folks in the recent past, and assure you that, yes, there has been a tremendous amount of data collected for this. It is not just something out of the blue that the planning department cooked up overnight at the Thomas Center. There is tremendous data available for this. We've done lots of public engagement. I've seen some folks say that we haven't done any public engagement on this. I don't know where exactly that page is. I wanted to try to reference some numbers here. There we go. We've had, in the listening sessions that have been done over the last 2 or 3 years with this, more than 500 participants, more than 400 hours of outreach and engagement in our Community Cultivators Fellowship program, more than 50 participants in a Conversation in a Box kind of neighborhood household gatherings, and many, many other opportunities for engagement throughout this process. Some of those folks are planning professionals and land use lawyers. Some of them are just regular folks who ended up being invited to somebody's house to talk about it. We have in the backup what ends up when you print it being about a ½ an inch of double-sided paper on very small font of comments that have been added to the process by regular folks. There's been a lot of input on this. There's been a lot of community engagement. We're not done with that. Today is another part of that. And the engagement process will be ongoing. So if somebody has said they haven't done any engagement, if somebody's told you that, they're not being, they may not understand. We're going to see part of the numbers on that through tonight's presentation. I've seen some folks concerned that it's missing plan elements that are required by statute. That is not the fact either. There are two kind of ways to think about this document. One of those is in, again, layperson's language. And it kind of leads with that lay language. But attached to every one of the chapters in lay language is a separate part, an addendum that includes all the legal language and everything that is required by statute. But we're trying to achieve more than just something that will keep lawyers and planners happy. We want this to be something that is useful to the community. And that is a different way of doing it. And it's going to require some getting used to for folks who have been doing it the other way for a career. So that's where we are on it. This is not done, but there is substantial work been put into it, and we are a good ways down the road to it. But tonight we're here for the Plan Board and the City Commission and some more members of the community to hear a presentation from our planning staff that I hope will be useful to all of us. I hope that we can ask good questions, both here on the dais and from the public. And with that, Madam Manager, do you want me to go directly to our director? Okay. Mr. Edelton, if you would come up and introduce yourself and give your prelude following my prelude. Actually, unless Mr. Ackerman wants to give any.
Let me
input
just
as well there.
say something briefly.
Yeah.
The Plan Board has also been working on the comprehensive plan for an extended period of time with public meetings and hearings and things like that. For people who don't understand, the comprehensive plan is really more like the 1,000-foot view of where the city is going, and it involves goals and policies, while the land development code is the implementing part of the code, and that is those changes will follow an adoption of an updated comprehensive plan. We want to continue. We've done quite a lot, and we would like to think that a lot of that work will continue, and that we can, find some common ground as we go forward on some of that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, this can be a dry as dust document that is exceptionally hard to understand, or it can be something that works for all of us. And my hope is that we get there. So, Mr. Eggleton.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners, Plan Board members. Forrest Eggleton, Acting Director for the Department of Sustainable Development, which of course houses the Planning Division, which largely leads the comprehensive plan update, and then of course leads the implementation of that comprehensive plan through the Land Development Code. And I myself am a planner, and I just have to say I am proud, both of course as the director, but as a planner, for what our staff and really our community have done up to this point. I think could not thank you, Mayor, for setting it up so succinctly, and of course thank you, Chair Ackerman, for setting it up in terms of that sort of 1,000-foot level perspective for what we're talking about here. So I think that that's helpful in the broader perspective to talk about why are we even doing this really, and how it fits in with everything else that we as the city do. So I think what staff has been asked to do, of course, is update you all as commissioners who have already been involved in this process for quite some time, but certainly some commissioners that may be new to this process since it has begun, and then of course some of our new Plan Board members as well, being all brought up to speed at the same time with all of the decision level and decision makers all now having the up-to-date information from staff and where we are to date, of course. So our outline is we're going to go through real quick. I always like to tell you what am I going to talk about before starting to talk about it. So of course, if I get really, really droning or boring, you can kind of like check your watch, like if it's a really long flight and you know where we're going to land. And then I'll also be able to see if you're checking your watch, and so I can know to speed it up. But going to give you a background. We're going to talk about what we're doing with the comp plan, which of course we're talking about or speaking of as Imagine GNV. And we're going to tell you about that structure, the introduction, the plan, how it fits into what we're trying to do as far as communicating from you all as the elected officials, of course, and then what our neighbors are telling you all and us as staff as what you want for our city to be and what the plan is going forward, and how we're going to put that in this 1,000-foot or even 35,000-foot document that then helps direct us and staff going forward as to both, of course, the programs that we can support, and then also, of course, for the data that we should be collecting, the problems that we're addressing, and the questions that we are asking. And then, of course, the moving forward. Really, the biggest point of this meeting is, are we all on the same page? Of course, with the commission, our neighbors, the plan board, and staff, and what we're looking at going forward. And of course, we're going to talk about how that's not just a planning approach or a sustainable development approach, but how we're working across all of our divisions and departments in the city to move forward. And then, of course, that continuation of the engagement and community input that we've done to date. So the process so far, going to give the overview, high-level, comprehensive plan. What is a comprehensive plan? Of course, tonight I'm going to try to both do what we're talking about, speak about comprehensive planning in a way that our neighbors can understand, our plan board members, commissioners can understand and speak about, but also something that is still very technically accurate and has that weight of both the planning profession, but what is required by law and state statute. So some of this might feel like I'm moving through quickly. Please feel free to stop me and ask those extra questions. But I'm going to try my best to not go into the lecture that some of you have already heard about what is comprehensive planning and things like that. But I'll go through this. So, of course, what is the comprehensive plan? As we discussed, it's this big overarching plan that we are required by state statute to undertake. that tells both our neighbors what you all as the elected officials, and then of course our citizens, our neighbors are saying through you all as the elected officials is what we want our city to be. So for us as the planning profession, we have to try to turn all of that into some sort of actionable technical document that both helps staff make decisions, but of course also helps people have these kind of conversations. How are we defining safety? How are we defining some of these bigger, broader terms that we discuss? And that's what our plan helps us to do. It doesn't always get into those exact technical, here safety equals, maybe these kinds of data points, but it does have that conversation as to the city thinks that, for example, again, safety is important, and here is how we are going to start trying to operationalize that and collect data for that. Where you all normally see our conversation about the comprehensive plan is in our land use decisions, and that is something, of course, that is very important, and that's why the planners are really in charge in large part of this process. But it is important to point out that this comprehensive plan is even bigger than just land use. It does go into the decision-making that the city and the city commission gets involved in on a large level. So to sort of reiterate or I guess point out again where we have started with this, as you mentioned, Mayor, that we are not under a strict deadline because we have submitted this letter to the state to have it verified that we are meeting the criteria as far as the appropriate statutes and the rules here, and the state agreed. And the typical deadline that may be more apparent as far as the dates that are stated in our planning timeline have been addressed with the submittal and the feedback from the state. So it's also important to point out that we did start originally from a resolution that was passed by the City Commission that asked staff to go and really look at drafting a plan for the city that was revolutionary in terms of what are the questions that are being asked and how are we focusing as staff in addressing some of these long-term or outstanding issues that our neighbors and our commission have identified. And so there was a resolution that was passed that really started off our process for the revamp or update, if you will, for the comprehensive plan. So as a part of that, of course, we have undertaken a sizable amount of research. We've worked out to other agencies, organizations for their data to start supporting the background and really the foundation of staff's approach to this. And of course, we also reached out to consultants and the HRA and consultants, HR&A consultants, to start helping us inform how we are going to build a comprehensive plan in a way that is not just by the strictures of traditional planning or what is strictly required by statute, but what can we do in addition to those things, which we, of course, as planning staff think we are, of course, we're allowed to do under the statute with of course, support and approval of the City Commission, but also is something that we think is a new look at planning in general, which we believe that we've been tasked to do. As you said, Mayor, that we are wanting to do comprehensive planning in a way that our neighbors can read a document and know what are the conversations that have been had at this high level, what are decisions that have been made at a high level by the commission and by our neighbors, and what can be expected for them, of course, as neighbors, as citizens, as property owners, going forward in their interactions with the city and the city commission. So these 3 steps here are really what we as staff were tasked to do by that resolution, and then of course with subsequent meetings that have happened with the City Commission and Plan Board going forward. This is an overview of that timeline that the consultants, the HR&A consultants went through to support their report that informed a lot of where staff is coming from in creating this new form of a comprehensive plan document. I won't go into detail here, but of course, in the interest of time, but of course, if you have questions on this phase or this timeline that the consultants went through, we're happy to answer questions there.
And up here on the dais, if you do have a question, try to reach out and hit the button nearest you, and we'll figure out who it is.
So again, this is putting it more in that Gantt form chart for the timeline that has gone into the comprehensive plan. You can see here, we really start this in January 2021. There were the multiple phases from the consultants from HR&A. We've had listening sessions, the community cultivators. You've seen in your background the engagement effort that the mayor pointed out as well. These next couple of slides are really intended to point out that engagement effort in a timeline and to also show that these are overlapping in a lot of ways and that a lot of different kinds of tools were used to reach out to the community. Of course, one of the biggest challenges and criticisms, and rightfully so, for the planning process to date is how we have used all of the different tools that are available to us to reach out to all of our neighbors and citizens. And so we really are trying to show here that in a way that has not been done before, certainly at the city and most likely in other jurisdictions in the state, we have really used this really diverse toolbox to try to get input throughout this entire process and timeline since 2021. And one thing I do want to point out is that some of these tools are still ongoing and that our neighbors can go to our website, continue to look at the draft as we have it today, and give us feedback and updates to that draft. And we are continuing to look at that and evaluate that feedback so that we can continue to inform this final document. So we're going to continue to go through the timeline here through 2022. Of course, there are a lot of different sections here, and I won't go through each one of these. And then we are on into 2023. Of course, as we got to the end of last year, we had the commission turnover, and some of that, of course, has included training, onboarding, descriptions of land development code, the comprehensive plan, and things like that. We have also, since February, started working with the Office of Equity and Inclusion on how we can really operationalize a lot of what their work has been at the city to date in how we operationalize the comprehensive plan following adoption and in that phase where we are starting to look at our specific land development code provisions and our programs and our data collection going forward. So just to point out again, this is not just a planning exercise. This is not just something for the planning staff to come up and craft, really, which is in large part traditional. That is what most jurisdictions do, is hire their staff in their planning divisions and departments, especially specific comprehensive planning staff, to work on doing a plan and drafting it themselves. What we have done at the city for years, even before my time, and what I think is really strongly to our organization's credit, is that we have really, as a planning division, broken up that segregation or that divide between current planning and how we operationalize or apply these things and this broader comprehensive planning. And in one of the ways that we are doing that is that we are making sure that our other departments are constantly as a part of our processes as much as is possible. So we are broadening out, we're branching out to make sure that these are not just one group of staff's functions or one group of people's education backgrounds to implement these things. We're using, in as much as possible, all of the staff that you all, of course, have selected to carry out the city's decisions. Again, and I won't go into this in detail because you all have discussed it, but this slide I think really sums up very well that engagement to date. The numbers here, frankly, are staggering in some cases for that outreach that any city has done or normally does for their comprehensive planning efforts, certainly with the size that the city of Gainesville is. As the mayor mentioned, we can talk about hundreds of comments on the draft plan, which again is still up on our website that is available for those comments from the public. We've had multiple meetings, multiple official meetings, multiple plan board meetings, multiple workshops to discuss this at several stages of this. And each one of those stages, of course, important to point out, has really informed the next set of drafts, the edits, and the approach or outcome of the plan to date. And some of these, the details in the next couple of slides here are the programs that were undertaken to collect this feedback. And to point out again, as I said, that input really has shaped the priorities of the plan. So I'm going to just go into a little bit more of the technical just for the document itself, the comp plan. Again, I'm not going to, unless you all really desire more specific information, go into this technical detail into the document at this point. But I do want to go over the structure of it and, of course, the lead staff. So, of course, the planning staff for all of the chapters has taken the lead as part of the planning process. The planners are the ones that are educated, of course, and trained in the broader organizational planning process and have led sort of this, again, 30,000, 35,000 foot sort of planning document process. But then, of course, knowing that we're not the subject matter experts for all the decisions by far that are made in the city, so have worked out or worked with other lead staff to make this effort better. And of course, we're mentioning the advisors and the consultants here as well that really set up the skeleton and the framework. So we have several chapters here. It's important to point out that we're naming these as chapters in a way that is more relatable. So some of you have seen that elements for our comprehensive plan currently, or what again is traditionally done, is that they are called the elements, or the future land use element, the historic preservation element. Those, what we're trying to do in this version or this update is make it a little bit more relatable. Elements is something that normally, or what, as you might imagine, most of our neighbors aren't immediately keyed to. What we are doing here is calling them chapters. It's something that's more intuitive. It's a more intuitive way to sort of separate some of the information that's broken out into a document that is in front of you. Now, that is to say that the elements are not gone. The elements are a required part of state statute. We do still have what is required by state statute in our supplementary documents, where we spell out, here is the future land use element, and our comprehensive plan points out that that is where this is located, and this is how we are still meeting these requirements of the statute. But so rather than starting at this level that most of you are familiar with, which is a planner tells you that it's policy 3.1.5, whatever, for something, you are now able to start with, and the citizens and our neighbors are able to start with, in our chapter of our city government, in this paragraph, it says, this is what you all have said is the city's approach to this. And then within those supplemental chapters, if appropriate, we will be able, as planning professionals and staff, or legal professionals and staff who might be defending this, to say, here's where we are meeting. I'm done. I'm good. Thank you, Chair. No, here's where we are meeting, of course, are both professional requirements and our requirements under the statute. So these chapters are broken down in some of these focus points, and you can see that we have staff representatives from several departments across the different chapters. So here, of course, again, I'm going to go through just some of the structure here. We have that introduction, and you can see on the left-hand side here that broader structure of the document itself. That a plan for all Gainesville is really that idea that we can communicate this to everyone. Of course, our decision makers, our staff, and then our neighbors as well. The implementation table, which I just jumped here to, sorry, on the left, is something that we feel is important to have as part of this plan, which is also something that is atypical, frankly, for a lot of comprehensive plans, that we are working with the Office of Equity and Inclusion on actually operationalizing this plan and using it in a way that we can collect real-world data that helps us make decisions as staff to have the most effective programs. And so, of course, based off of that direction from the resolution, we are focused on, in large part, this equity-based outcomes and strategies. So we are looking at our programs and our data collection as that lens, of course, that you've heard all talked about, that equity lens for how we make our decisions and collect our data at the city. So these are the chapters, of course. This is more looking at how we have them organized, and definitely a big shout out to our communications as well, who worked with us on this version of the draft and really making it approachable. I'm sure if you have been to our website that shows the current draft and the new draft, one, is a little more inviting to say the least, and the current one, even planners and professional staff have a hard time reading at length. So going back into this implementation table here, we really want to stress that we're not just creating a plan, another one of those plans that sits on a shelf, or one of those plans that we only use one of the state statute required elements to make our decisions or really operate as a city. We want to make a plan that talks at a high level what our neighbors want, and then we also want to actually make programs and decisions and collect data based off of that. So we really want to make an implementation strategy or an implementation plan behind this. And of course, behind all of this, both required by statute and something that is just foundational and critically important, is that data that we collect. So of course, first, the plan guides us to the questions that we're going to ask, the most appropriate questions that you as the commission identify and our neighbors identify. And then based off of those questions that are asked, we as staff will know what data we should be collecting or what we should be listening to in addition from our neighbors and our citizens is data points that we should be collecting and evaluating going forward. So the backbone really in large part of all of this, or operationalizing this, is that data and analysis that staff undertakes as a part of the guidance or that comprehensive plan. So here we go through the how we build example. Again, I'll avoid going into detail here unless you all would like me to, but just to show that depending on the question that is asked is the different sort of data that we're collecting, the time frame that we may be looking at in the broader data collection and question that we're asking, and then of course to point out that we are always working with other agencies and organizations to collect this data. So in this case, this data comes from the Schimberg Center. And then these supplemental strategies, again, to point out that this is really the vehicle, of course, where we are presenting, again, what is required by statute in terms of that data analysis and the feedback that needs to inform a lot of these decisions, but we're coupling it with a different way of doing a comprehensive plan that incorporates our neighbors' feedback and our neighbors' communication and our neighbors' values and the commission's communication and values into this guiding document. And so again, here are some of the examples that are included in your backup. And these documents, of course, on the left are hyperlinked here. And the moving forward and next steps. So as I mentioned, we're continuing to collaborate with the Office of Equity and Inclusion on really how are we operationalizing this. Really working with our colleagues in OEI is extremely helpful for us for which data we should be collecting and which questions or really which level of questions that we should be asking in order to address what our commission and our neighbors has said is a real problem that they're seeing in the community. So that completed final draft of the document, we have on here that the end of 2023, we would really like that end of the document to be ready then, and then ready to present forward for those next steps of the plan board and the commission to give their review and then begin those adoption hearings by the beginning of 2024, but then hopefully to have the ultimate adopted final draft by the end of March of 2024. And you can see here as well that, of course, the state will be involved in the review process, not just all the way up to that final deadline, but we have reached out to them and we intend to continue to reach out to them to give them that cursory review for our approach here, because as we've said, frankly, it is new and it is something that they are not accustomed to seeing. And with that, that is the end of my presentation. Obviously, I am here for any questions. And we have several staff from the different divisions and charter officers as well who can answer questions.
Okay, commissioners, plan board members? Seeing no lights, let's go ahead and reach out to the public.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, we have Richard Allen, and on deck will be Kenna Silva.
Come on up, Mr. Allen.
Hi, I'm Richard Allen, and I'm a member of the on the board of Gainesville Neighborhood Voices, and we've really been involved in this last year in trying to build a lot of community consensus and get involved with all of the Gainesville neighborhoods, help to increase the communication between and among those neighbors and neighborhoods, and of course a lot of our focus is on affordable housing and is on neighborhood development and keeping, helping neighborhoods grow the way that the neighbors in those neighborhoods would like the growth to take place. I would just like to say, number one, I completely appreciate the incredible amount of work that's gone into the plan so far. It's clear. I mean, there's been a lot of engagement. There's been a lot of input from the community. I also am aware in the last year that there's been a big groundswell of neighbor engagement and community engagement, especially around affordable housing and around neighborhoods. We now have a list of about 1,000 local neighborhood residents who are interested in affordable housing, and they range from renters across the board to single-family residents. Most of those people probably were not part of the process. Most of the people I've spoken with have told me they weren't part of the process to date. So it just seems like a really great opportunity now that we've got so much more community engagement and community interest in all of this. Seems like a great opportunity for us to really do what, Mayor Ward, what you would describe that we're going to do, which is to continue that engagement. And when I look at the timetable there, I think, well, gosh, if we discount December and we are starting out in September, we've got 3 months for remaining communication and getting out among the neighbors and getting more input on the plan. And it just feels like we maybe should ask to have those pushed out just a little bit so that we have a little more time. That would be my take on this. And I really appreciate all the work that's been done. It's been huge, a huge undertaking. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Dennis Silva, and then on deck we have Monica Frazier.
Hello, thank you. I so agree. I mean, 5 months, that's nothing. And anyway, there's a lot to say about the community engagement process and all of that. Anyway, I so appreciate the experience of the 2 longtime plan board members and the new member with deep experience on related city boards and the city commissioner with years in city, county, and state government. Thank you for your continuing service and understanding of public process. I especially appreciate plan board members' request a 1.5 years ago for public participation and technical section updates. You even asked staff to reach out to people who've been following planning and zoning issues for years to get their take on some of the details. And I appreciate very much the example that was brought up of 2014, 2015, that I know that 2 of the current plan board members were involved with. And it was a wonderful example of actual community engagement. I mean, they went week after week, site visits, meetings, hearings, and they and the staff and then in 2015 the commission worked very hard on form-based code for 5% of the city. And I think this, as the comprehensive plan, to throw it onto brand new plan board members, plenty of people who haven't been involved in that it's not right. Anyway, so the next week after that meeting, let's see, this is February 15th, 2022, last year, and that was a meeting of the plan board to which no one called in. I sent you some of the captions from that meeting, and I really appreciated the the plan board's request for more information, more public engagement. And then the next week, it all got balled up with exclusionary zoning. And as a person who's been following this for a long time, I would have to take 2 days just to go through the draft plan. So I don't know how anybody who out there would begin to get all the details and see. I do see lines like the taxpayers are still going to be subsidizing UF into eternity, I guess, for its innovation district and the exclusionaries. I mean, there's so many lines. It just would be impossible to go through it with any understanding at all. I would just ask that you open it back up for genuine public participation and take your time, just as the plan board did in 2014, to get it right. It's, I mean, you just can't push it all off into exclusionary zoning. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done on this.
Thank you, Ms. Silva. I do need to point out, when we say only 5 months, that's 4 years and 5 months at this point, and hundreds of people who have engaged with the process at this point.
You said
So,
you paid to send out social media posts, 10 people.
no, that's simply not accurate. We engaged a lot more than 10 people in this. And staff will be happy to go through that with you. We're here to hear from folks, but we're not going to put out information that is inaccurate. Okay?
Good evening. So as we were going through the slides, I noticed that on one of the first ones, it had a number 1 and it said Center Black Gainesville and Underrepresented Residents. And I'm curious, what does that mean? That wasn't addressed at all. And what are the benefits of this for the Black communities, since we are the center, I'm assuming? And then I'm curious to know what the percentage of the community engagement was actually from Black members of our community. If that is the focus and the target group that we want to make better, I would hope that those voices were engaged. And then also, when this is all said and done, how are you going to roll this out and communicate it to the community that, okay, we have this new plan that's supposed to make your lives better and improve it? I think we should at least have a way to let the people know, instead of just having things done in our name for us without us at the discussion table. Those are my comments. Thanks.
Thank you. So I would point out that when we get to a point where this is finished, we're going to be more than a year from now, or right about a year from now at a minimum. And yes, we should have a robust rollout process. But I want to be careful too that we're not trying to think of this as something that is going to be a plan for how to make everybody's life better today. It's the plan for how Gainesville grows, for when somebody wants to build something, they have something to refer to. When somebody wants to talk about, where do schools go and that sort of thing, where should parks be, we have a document there that exists as a reference tool and a guideline. I don't want anybody to think this is something that is describing ways where we're going to, in the middle of 2024, go make your life better. Because that is not what a comprehensive plan is. But it is, I hope, we get to a point where it's something that the community can better understand that comprehensive plan. We got one right now. We've had one for a very long time that gets updated every now and then. It just gets updated in a fashion that doesn't make a lot of sense to most folks. We're trying to do better than that. So yes, we should roll it out in a well-marketed and well-understood sort of way. But we're a long, long way from that right now. So thank you for that. Do we have more comments or?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So before we get to the other comments, Mr. Arlton, do you want to give some brief comments on the concept of centering Black Gainesville and some of the work that we've done in that regard?
Sure. So really what staff has taken that to mean is that a lot of, again, to go back to the questions that are asked and the data that is collected. So to date, really, frankly, staff and the city have not collected data in a way that is focused on a lot of the problems that have been identified, certainly with race and equity in our city. And so what we're really trying to do, in addition to the day-to-day requirements that are inherent in the comprehensive plan and what's required by the state statute, is also start asking these questions and collecting the data that backs up or does not back up, of course, some of the assertions or the things that we either know or we think to be true. So of course, the best way to start solving these problems, at least from the staff perspective, is that collecting that data. And then of course, that best way to collect that data is to know what question you're asking. And so really it is that changing the questions that we're asking as staff in the way that we plan and make decisions for the city.
All right, thank you. So before I come back up to the dais, how many more folks do we have to speak?
We have 2 more speakers signed up.
If y'all don't mind, let's get through those speakers. I just didn't want to let that get stale before we responded. So who's next?
Sure. We have Kim Tanzer and followed by Carrie Parker Warren.
Welcome, Ms. Tanzer.
Thank you. Is there a person?
There you go.
So I'd like to speak to 2 things that have been mentioned today. One is participation by community members, and as many of you know, I've participated in numerous events. I think that in general, communication between community members and decision makers can happen in one of 2 ways. Either it's that you're collecting local knowledge before you make decisions, or you're getting feedback on decisions that you're proposing, draft decisions. All of the sessions I've been in so far have focused on, I guess, gathering local knowledge because there hasn't been enough substance until this point to give feedback on. And it's not possible to go through the document as written in the time that we've had and see, oh yes, this comment that I heard 6 times or that I made 6 times is incorporated. So it's just hard to tell how that's worked out at this point. What I'd mostly like to talk about today, though, is the substance of what's going on tonight. We've heard from Mr. Edelton about how much input there was. We haven't talked about the substance of the plan at all. And that, I think, is really what we need to talk about as a community. He referenced the data and analysis that's required for a number of chapters, and I brought a draft off of the current website. So this is from the plan that's in action now. The data and analysis, for instance, for the, let's pick cultural affairs that is now, I forget what it's been renamed, but anyway, it was 14 pages and it was updated in 2012. The future land use element had a 78-page data and analysis backup document from 2001. None of that information has been updated, or if it has, it's not available to the public yet. And I think that's the frustration that I have, which is it may be that everything here is going in a good direction, but there's really no way to know because the data that you've collected is not available. Apparently not to you and certainly not to the public. And just to point out how that then gets enacted, as some of you know, the comprehensive plan is what's used to justify decisions that you'll be making in the future. So you'll see in future land use elements proposed, it'll say, as it says in comprehensive plan, section such and such, chapter such and such, blah, 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 and it quotes things. The document and the wording is incredibly important for the future of the community, and we are not seeing that yet. And if I could have just another minute or two, or minute. This is, I just randomly picked one of the pages from the 200-page slideshow you received this evening. And so, for instance, this is the outcome: all Gainesville residents can enjoy living in equitable and complete communities. It talks about indicators being things like walkability scores, community perceptions of urban form. We don't know what they are now, so you won't be able to tell if they've improved or not. And that's what we need to be talking about as a community. And I hope that you will give us the information and that you yourself will read it and consider if you're using your staff's time wisely, because the data that would be required to evaluate these indicators is so substantial that it would take a whole new department to just track the data all the time, I think, from what I can tell. And obviously, you don't have the staff to do that, so you'll have to be more strategic. And we are not at a point, you're not and we're not, unless there's a secret cache of information that's available to you all but not to the public. You're not yet prepared for any of us to talk about the substance. And the substance is really
I'm gonna
what we
ask you to
care
wrap up,
about.
Ms. Danzer.
Thank you.
Thank you. So,
And it takes more than 3 minutes to have that discussion, obviously.
well, I did give you 420.
I know, it takes more than 422.
And I would point out that this is not, as you well know, the only opportunity to have input with us. We have conversations. I think it's a pretty accessible group of people. But hold on, I'm gonna get right to you. I just wanted to address this real quick. In the backup are also what are termed supplemental strategies for each one of these points. And there's a lot more detail in those supplemental strategies than there is in the chapters themselves. It may be that you've already looked at that, but I'm just trying to point out that what you had up there is not the end-all and be-all of that item, for instance.
Is that the data and analysis that it didn't look like it to me?
So I am not the expert on it, but I do know that I have read the supplemental strategies and looked through those. There's a longer conversation to be had there, absolutely. Again, this is not the final document that we're looking at tonight, nor can we pass anything this evening. So, Ms. Parker Warren.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. As I walked into the building, the first thing I noticed that I didn't see anybody on the planning board that looked like me. And I don't see how you can have a planning board without having, without being inclusive, that includes people from all over Gainesville. Now, I'm not sure that I applied for that board, but one of these boards I applied for, they told me that they couldn't use me at that time. So I'd have to go back and check my records. But I'm not sure what the criteria is for getting on this planning board, but we should be represented, all sides of Gainesville, and maybe you have somebody that looks like me, and that just the person is probably absent tonight. But I don't have a degree in building. I don't have a degree in any of that. I'm not sure what the criteria is, but I do have a master's in administration and supervision. So if that would do, and if you don't have anybody applying for it, you might need to send your chair out of the planning board of somebody to recruit somebody that looks like me, because that's a little disheartening when you come in and you're talking about you're inclusive and you're going to add make this plan so that all of Gainesville, this is how you want Gainesville to look. But when I came in here tonight, I don't want it to look like that. It does sound very good when the young man came up to give his report, and he talked about being inclusive and including citizens and neighbors and taxpayers that will benefit from this comprehensive plan. But hopefully he'll do what he said and make sure that we are all included. I'd like to ask a question about the lead, I guess the chair people that help you put this plan together. Are they just volunteers, or are they hired by the city? The leads that you had, the captains of each one of those departments, I'd like to know if they are paid or if they are part of your staff.
They're city staff.
Oh. Well, you might want to include some people from the community to join some of those groups that you have, because we want to be a part of this too. And I would like to ask the same question that Ms. Monica asked. how do you get the information to, if you want to include all of the people from the community, how are we going to get a copy of this? Or how do we get interested in it? How do you recruit us? What do we know? We have lots of people that are not here tonight that probably don't even know what you're talking about. How do we include some of these people that are sitting home and could care less about what you're talking about, but still want to be involved?
So that's an excellent question. I'm glad you asked it, because over the last 3+ years of working on this, we very intentionally, we hired folks in the community as fellows to to do outreach, to get out there and talk to folks in their neighborhoods, and try to. We hosted things in people's homes. We did, and we're happy. I'm sure there's a record of where events were held and that sort of thing. Happy to get those out to you, because it does matter, and it matters to the point that we're very intentional about not just saying, come to City Hall and go through a hearing.
Well, the community that I live in is Azalea Trails. Nobody knocked on my door to have a meeting at my home. Nobody invited me to have a meeting. So when you do that again, send somebody around my neighborhood, and if you're paying them, call me and I'll go around the neighborhood.
So I do want us to make sure that we get the information back out about how we did that, because it's important that folks understand we did what most cities do in this process, is you have a few planning board meetings, you have a few commission meetings or council meetings, wherever they are, and you publish some notices in the newspaper, and you say, we've got a new plan. That's how that generally works. It is risky to not do it that way. It is risky to get out and talk to hundreds of people, because when we come back and say we talked to hundreds of people, folks are going to come up to the microphone and say, you didn't talk to me. And that's probably true, because there are 145,000 people in this city, and we're not going to talk to everybody. It's not going to work like that. These folks who were charged with doing this did more work on engagement than I have seen other communities do. Now, that doesn't mean it's been perfect, and it doesn't mean it's done. But it is important to recognize that literally hundreds of people have been a part of the process and gave comments, and those comments are, in many cases, written in the backup for tonight's presentation. It doesn't mean it's perfect. It's not. This is still draft. We're still working. There's going to be more, but I want everybody to walk out here understanding that we have done a lot of that outreach to people who normally aren't talked to, who normally aren't part of what goes on here. So thank you for that, for indulging me there. Do we have any more comment?
That was our last comment.
Mr. Fields, come on up. Yeah, normally we try to get folks to sign up for public comment, but come on up, Mr. Fields. Yep, I got you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. My name is Wayne Fields from Azalea Trails from the East Gainesville Alliance, and I was working this afternoon up until 6 o'clock, just shortly of that. And of course, I was working at a elementary school, Caring and Sharing Learning School. And at Caring and Sharing, we're right across the street from Woodland Park. And I'm sure you all are very familiar of late with Woodland Park, the shooting that went on. I was in a class with kindergartens, and there were about 15 or 20 kids. And those 15 or 20 kids did not understand what was happening when the security guard came in that room and said, everybody run to the corner, lay down. This is not a practice drill. This is real. Those kids started crying, and it was traumatic, not only to the kids, but also to me as well, to their parents, to the family who are missing. What does that have to do with tonight? Single-family land use. That's our main concern. That's been our concern in East Gainesville, with the 89% being renters. And we would like to make sure that the single-family land use ordinance that is in existence is not disturbed in any way. Can you all please take that under consideration? I've missed most of the meeting to be enlightened about exactly what this is all about. But as I understand, if it has anything to do with single-family land use and changing the ordinance and making an exception, no, we don't want it. We do not want it. So please, if you will, listen to the cries of those students in that room, because that's what East Gainesville is now experiencing. Listen to the opinions of some of the people who've spoken from there. That's why we so diligently have turned out for meeting after meeting after meeting to talk about what's going on in East Gainesville. And to think that if you all did some community outreach, you didn't come to Azalea Trails, how can that possibly have taken place when we've been down to meeting after meeting after meeting? It's just a phone call. I'm a graduate of the University of Florida. I'm probably indebted to this community as more than anyone. Not only did I graduate with a degree in marketing, but I also was a student athlete there. I'm registered as a vendor with the city of Gainesville. I'm a husband and a father of 7. And we'd like to know that this community is safe. Please keep us informed. We'll participate, we'll volunteer, and we'll also do business with the city of Gainesville. So keep us in mind. Please do not overlook us. And we do know that we are just a few out of the 145,000.
So, Mr. Fields, thank you for your comments. I would point out that one of the reasons that we did not directly include Azalea Trails, the group that's been meeting at Lincoln for a year or so, is that most of this input, again, and this has been going on for 3+ years. So most of that input, that outreach had been done prior to that group really kicking off in a substantial way. I've been down there at your meetings, and I know when they started, and much of this input had been taken already, these hundreds of hours prior to that. So that's why that particular group was not engaged directly. That's an answer I can make for you. But I appreciate you being here and your input this evening. And we are not finished with the document by any means. We will continue to hear from folks. We're not done. It's a draft. That's what we've been saying all evening. So, and I would also say that we want to be careful that in the process, we don't accept Gainesville as it currently is for the way it ought to necessarily be for the next decade, because everything's not perfect. I love our town, but we have improvements we need to make, as you very eloquently pointed out. We have to do better, and doing better means it can't stay exactly the same. Now, I'm not talking about zoning codes and zoning categories. I'm talking about in general. We need to take a hard look at how to make things better. And if we say nothing can change, then nothing will change. So we need to hear from everybody and make sure that we make good choices in this process. So thank you for that. Anybody else on public comment?
That was our last speaker, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. And we do have some lights up here now. I'm going to go to Hang on just a second. Number one, Ms. Bell? Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jamie Bell. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chair. I've been on the plan board for approximately an hour and 12 minutes, so thank you for having me. If you don't know me, I'm also the chair of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. I've been hosted by Mr. Fields at the East Gainesville Alliance to talk about inclusionary zoning and affordable housing needs, and I live in East Gainesville, and so I'm really excited to be on this board now. There's a couple of items that I've been taking notes on as we go along, and in response to what some of the folks in the public have said, I would like to take a minute to acknowledge the demographics of our audience versus the dais and how stark that is to me. I've been pushing to get more general board and committee recruitment in the city, not only on affordable housing, but on other committees, and it is definitely, it makes me emotional to see the difference in that, so I just want everyone to acknowledge that for a second. But that being said, I wanted to talk about the plan in general, and that I appreciate and respect all the work that staff put into this. I know some members of staff personally, and I know it's hours, hundreds and hundreds of hours of work, and you've done a great job, but I feel like, yes, we've been given all the backup, but tonight we were just told kind of what work went into it, but not necessarily what the big changes were, and I was hoping to ask staff over here to maybe highlight the biggest changes from the previous comp plan to this one. If Mr. Edelton is perhaps available to talk about a couple of those. Again, I'm new. I know you guys have been doing this for years at this point, and so I apologize if this is reiterating something that's been said before, but
Most of our commission is new too.
okay, cool. So I was hoping, A, that we could have staff highlight just maybe some of the biggest changes from the last plan to now. And I was not necessarily satisfied with the answer to the question on how centering Black Gainesville was represented in the plan. Again, I appreciate that we're asking different questions and we're like gathering different data, but what is the result of that is kind of what I'm curious about too, and where that falls into what is being described as kind of the center representation within our plan, those underrepresented citizens and Black Gainesville in general. So I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be here and to bring these items up, and I appreciate the folks who are here in the audience today bringing up really good points. Thank you for giving me grace to get up to speed, but that's what I had. Thank you.
Mr. Edelton, you want to address that?
Absolutely. Thank you. So you asked for a couple. I'll try to give you three big differences between what there is practice to date and what we are doing. So the first biggest one is that communication point. So today when you go and look at our plan, it's not easy to digest or understand what the city is trying to communicate or decisions that are being made. So we're trying to change how we even communicate that, for one. That's the biggest one. The second one would be that we really intend to implement the plans that are stated in this overarching document. So that is something that really, frankly, is largely different from planning practice for comprehensive planning to date. Is, okay, sure, you've said that these are your goals, policies, objectives. Well, how are you going to do it? Normally, that doesn't happen. That is another part that we are, one, trying to set up with the way that we've drafted the comp plan to date, but then also with the further work that we're saying that we're going to do with that implementation strategy and document that we're working with equity and inclusion. That third part is, as we've talked about, that outreach that we've done for years. And the different tools that we've had in the toolbox for that outreach, between the plan board meetings, the actual required public outreach for our, of course, normal agenda items and things like that. But in addition to that, as I mentioned, our website, our workshops that we've done, the different tools that were outlined on a couple of the slides there are all that we've put together to really try to do our best with the tools that we can identify to reach out to as many people as possible, while still really understanding that we have more work to do for how we are going to reach out and continue to reach out. But the body of tools that we've used and the responses that we've gotten to date and how they've influenced our draft has not been done before in this city, and I would hazard to say in most, if not all, jurisdictions in the state. There was another part of your question, the equity element to it. Would you mind please just stating it again so I can be sure that I'm focused?
Yeah, of course. It has been stated that we want to really center Black Gainesville and underrepresented citizens in our comprehensive plan, and I'm curious, we've talked about asking different questions and gathering data, but how does that practically equate to something in the comprehensive plan?
So it's a two-part answer. First, for this comprehensive plan, it's really for the commission and our neighbors to answer that question first. And that's part of this process that we have done to date and that we are still doing as part of this draft update, is that if there are these elements, or if this is this decision, how does equity, how does race affect the city of Gainesville? Of course, that is ultimately a decision, as any decision, up to the city commission to give us as staff guidance to. That second part is now with that direction, how do we as staff ask the questions that really get that data that answers these questions, or can build programs to identify or address some of these problems that we have been directed to address.
That just felt like a circle of answer. I'm not, still not, I apologize, Mr. Ellison. I know you've done so much work. It's a humongous document, but like,
Sure.
what is Black Gainesville getting out of this plan? And like, what are underrepresented groups getting out of this plan other than being asked questions so that you know what questions to ask?
Sure. So first, to it being circular, it is. That's planning, of course. You know, planning is not something that has a start and stop and that the document has a finish and then we do that. It's iterative. So that is why it inherently sounds circular, and I'm appreciative of the criticism. And certainly, what is getting out of it is that Black Gainesville has not gotten what they are asking for out of our current comprehensive plan. And we are trying to create a new product, a new document that does give those things.
That was a better answer. Thank you.
Thank you for giving me a second chance.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
It is on that slide, yes. And I was just reminded to go back to our original, directive to this resolution. So I will certainly pull this up.
Do you want to key in on the equitable? Could you enlarge that?
I don't know
Yeah,
that
I'm
I
not
have the
sure.
power to enlarge,
Can't.
but it really is to get that more representation and more equity out of comprehensive planning than has been done to date.
So I can read that C here I've got in front of me. I'll try to. Equitable development, public and private investments, programs and policies in neighborhoods to meet the needs of marginalized people and reduce disparities, taking into account past history and current conditions so that quality of life outcomes such as access to quality education, living wage employment, healthy environment, affordable housing and transportation are equitably distributed for the people currently living and working here as well as for new residents. That's what that says. Madam Manager.
Mr. Mayor, members of the Plan Board, as well as, of course, the Commission. So we've been meeting over the last week or two with the Office of Equity and Inclusion, Ms. Bell, and we have been working more on the operational side of the comprehensive plan, which is, we say, more like a constitution, big picture. But how you get at the information here in terms of how it impacts the Black community and other underrepresented communities is on the operational side, which means that we have to work with the Office of Equity and Inclusion, be more intentional and specific about measures in our community that we know need to be addressed. It's not going to be addressed here. It will be addressed in the operational plan that will have to be submitted to the commission because it is an operational issue. And so the plan board will have access to it, but it will be something that will come to this commission. It has been underscored on several occasions from the dais by Commissioner Duncan Walker, equitable development, which is an element here. But it will have to be delved into with the Office of Equity and Inclusion. They are working with us right now on a service level agreement, I believe that's what we're calling it, so that the Office of Sustainable Development, Housing, Park, Recreation, Fire, Police Department, everybody that impacts the community in a certain way will have to have measurable performance measures that will be presented to this commission for review, for input, and they will become an operational side of this that will have to be reported to the commission and to the community. So that is work to be done, and you're not going to necessarily see that here. It will be a separate document.
And Mr. Mayor, I think that's the exact answer I and maybe the audience was looking for, in that the answers are not going to be in the comprehensive plan, but the comprehensive plan will direct staff to come up with operational initiatives to address those needs that you've stated our community is asking for and has not received yet. And so this is going to be the first step to get the actionable items next.
There you go.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
So before we go to Commissioner Duncan Walker, I will tell you that a thing that I've learned as a commissioner is that if you ask a planner a question, they're going to give you a planning answer. And I am not a planning professional, so that is something I've had to realize over the years. It's okay to ask it in a different way. And our planning staff is amazing, but they are primarily planners and not
Politicians.
not politicians, exactly. So, all right, Commissioner Duncan Walker. All right, Ms. McMullen, if you want to.
Sure, I'm Brittany McMullen, Planning Department. I did want to ask, because I know there was a question asked about, just to kind of give a general idea of how is the proposed plan different from what we have now? And I think just showing, just shows a random part, and if I could get the overhead. One of the outcomes that is in the proposed comprehensive plan. So it says, all Gainesville residents, regardless of their race, ethnicity, income, gender, age, or ability, will have access to equitable, reliable, affordable, and safe transportation. How we actually get there, as city manager just said, that's what we're being tasked to work on in the future. What's different about this versus the comprehensive plan that's in place now is that what's in place now would just say we need connectivity, like we need connected transportation. It doesn't focus on, but who's getting that transportation? Where is it going? Like, are all of the groups in the community being served? Or is it just, it's trying to look at it through a different lens. It's not just give us transportation. It's who's getting it and how's it being used, I think. So that's just one example of, and we're not going to be able to answer all the questions in the comprehensive plan, but it's just supposed to be the guiding document for, we need to be looking at this for people that have historically been underrepresented. And that's the challenge, I think. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you. Mr. Duncan Walker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I heard Manager Curry broach the subject. I thank you very much for that. It's an issue that I ran on, equitable development, and it was one that I was grateful to hear my colleagues from this dais support unanimously. It will be a standalone document that works in tandem with the comprehensive plan. And so staff is working on that right now. It will be, I don't want to speak too much for the direction that they're headed in because I don't even know all of it, but it is something that will be coming back to us. And I'm really grateful to have had unanimous support from the commission to move that forward because it is designed for that level of accountability to make sure that we are looking at all parts of Gainesville, making sure that a quality of life, an improved quality of life is enjoyed by all of the residents. So thank you very much once again, colleagues. Thank you, staff, for working on that accompanying document.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan Walker. Chair Ackerman.
I just have two slight responses to some comments. One, how communities are going to find out about this, ideally, is you participate in its construction and you tell your neighbors. And so this is not intended, and if you can't tell, we're trying to figure out a way to get very large active participation by the people this is going to affect. So we would hope that we're not going to have to communicate it to you as a finished product, because we're hoping people who care about this will participate in it and the result will reflect that. That's a hard thing. It's very difficult to do effective outreach. And unfortunately, that's what it is. Second of all, and this is just some data about the initial slide that points out the equity issues that we're trying to deal with. The City Commission did commission a report that is basically the beginning of data collection in a different place, in a different way, and that's called the HR&A report. It's available on the website, and I would encourage people to read it because it will give you a basic direction of why this comprehensive plan is being rewritten in the fashion that it is. And it collects a lot of data on historical inequities, and it also begins to say, how do we establish policies that are accountable to what we're trying to do? Meaning, if we're trying to do some specific thing, as Ms. Mullins just pointed out, there is both the desire to do this, and then there is the accountability. Is what we're doing actually going to achieve that goal? And so those are the two things, but I would encourage people to explore the website, but there is some beginning data from HR&A, and that will begin to give you a picture of why the city is moving in the direction it is. It's not the end of what we're doing, it's the beginning. So you might want to read that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Ackerman. And I think that's number 9, way down there. One of you two.
Do you have a comment, or you want me to go for it?
No, you're.
All right.
The 9 twins.
Good evening. I must admit, I'm a planning consultant by trade, specializing in comprehensive planning, so this may get a little boring. I apologize for that. But this is a workshop, and I want to make sure I have productive feedback for staff and what they can be addressing. So I do have some general questions for you, Forrest, if you have a second. One thing that I didn't see clearly identified in there was the planning horizon for the plan. I know statutes require that. I have more questions. I don't know if you just want me to list them all off, or...
I'm going to see if I can take the opportunity to give this to some of my other professionals to answer this. I think there's been a fair amount of me, but.
Come on, Nate.
So can you, I'll introduce myself. My name is Nathaniel Chan. I'm a planner with the City of Gainesville, Department of Sustainable Development. I've been working on the comprehensive plan since 2020 in various different aspects, part of drafting the plan, doing working meetings, trying to wrap our heads around equity, and it's been a really long process. I had the opportunity to kind of spearhead this project from last year in June, and I'm happy to answer your question, but I need a little bit more clarification on what you mean by planning horizon.
Sure. So Florida statutes requires planning horizons and comprehensive plans to be identified. They're basically what year the plan is planning for or out to, right? So Gainesville, if we decide as a community it should be 2040, Gainesville may look very different in 2040 than it does if we're planning for 2050. So I want to know if that's been decided by staff as part of these discussions yet, or if we've talked about that at all.
Yeah. 2033. So yes, thank you. Thanks for giving us the opportunity. So the 10-year horizon from the last comprehensive plan. So of course that would include this period of time that we're discussing doing the plan and the planning, but it would be 10 years from that last one.
Perfect. Just I had another question. Actually, this one about how we're going to incorporate the Live Local Act and what it can do within the context of our comprehensive plan. Now that's been a live wire. That's been happening. I know you haven't had time to fully process how that needs to be incorporated in the comprehensive plan. But one thing that does alarm me about the Live Local Act is it does expose our industrial and commercial lands to affordable housing, which is something that we need to do. But unfortunately, industrial lands are really, really hard to get on the map in the first place, nonetheless, to create more of. They're also major employers of our citizens. So I want to know if that's been discussed about how we are going to address that, because, like I said, getting industrial lands on the map is really, really hard.
So absolutely, and you're right, that is relatively new and has been something that the planning staff is absorbing really in what we're going to do with our land development code and then currently the draft for the comprehensive plan. It is something that we have to plan for in as much as we can, but the actual real world ramifications of that are simply not clear yet. As you said, industrial land is limited and also has its own value in of itself. Whether or not those values change to start supporting more of the housing that Live Local Act is actually trying to target is not clear at this point. But that being said, what we are doing really immediately is incorporating that into our land development code. And so to tie sort of this all the way back is one of the things that we are really trying to do in addition with this update to the comp plan is make it more flexible as this overarching document that can really roll with the punches, for lack of a better phrase, currently for some of these state statutes or other unforeseen requirements and regulations that the city is affected by. So now we're still able to articulate what we as the city and the commission care about, but now we're going to be able to start addressing how we operationalize this in our land development code, and then of course when and if we update that implementation document that we're speaking of.
Excellent. Sorry to keep hogging the stage. Anyone, if you want to interrupt me, that's perfectly fine. So equity is a big thing that we're trying to address with this comprehensive plan, and I applaud the city for doing that. Many communities that we work with don't do that. In fact, actively tell us not to include that language within the plan. So the fact that that's a central tenet of Gainesville is incredible and should be applauded in and of itself. One thing that is more of a day-to-day thing of the comprehensive plan is they are primarily used on a day-to-day basis for making land use decisions. The comprehensive plan gets amended, so to speak, anytime there's a future land use map amendment, which is quite frequently. Has equity considerations been discussed for future land use map amendments as part of this process?
Not in a detailed way, in that 35,000 foot level way. How does land use address or affect the issues that have been identified? And so that next step, of course, in that implementation document, are we asking the right questions? What data are we collecting to address or really further discuss that?
Understood. And then I was hoping that you could speak a little bit about the data analysis, because obviously that's required to be updated by statute for each element. And I know we're doing chapters and supplement to elements. And so I was hoping I'd give you a platform to talk about the data analysis, and then if it's not already being updated, are you updating it as part of this process? I mean, we're not using data from the 1990s, right? We're using the latest and greatest data that we can obtain as a city.
Yeah, happy to speak about that. I think it was brought up earlier in the meeting that we currently have data analysis chapters for each of our comp plan chapters online, and many of those are very lengthy. They can almost feel like planning like stream of consciousnesses, where we're just like, we really like this idea, we want to put this in place, and we really talk about all the concepts in there. In practice, a lot of that hasn't been very helpful to implementing some of the things that we want to put together, and data changes all the time. So we're constantly responding, reacting to things that are happening in the community. And so for that to be more lucrative is something that I think we're definitely taking a more closer look at. I can speak to the data analysis that we have right now. It's not included in the backup for today. It is in flux, so we're kind of polishing that to bring forward to you at another time. It does touch on a lot of the state statute requirements. We're definitely making sure that we have all of the maps that are needed, the housing projections that are needed, and trying to analyze that also from an equity standpoint has been a little bit challenging. We can no longer just say, you know, we're providing X amount of houses throughout the city. We need to also just change the question to say, where is that housing going? How affordable is it? We're kind of like grasping with those questions as well. But hopefully the data analysis that I do present to you at a future time is sufficient, and definitely welcome comment about that.
And something to add to that as well is it's a mix of data of new and old and updated data. So depending on the section or the chapter or the question that's being asked, for example, you know, the list of invasive species hasn't changed a whole lot. It does change, but it changes at a different rate based off of a variety of other data that we're looking at to make our decisions. So in some cases, yes, that data that we already have is sufficient and informs our decision making at the level that it's at today. In some cases, we need to use the data that we have currently, and in some cases, we need to make sure that we use that data that we have and collect new data again and ask new questions.
Excellent. One thing that I did want to note on that, for the data analysis, it sounds like there's people in the room that are even interested in reviewing it. I mean, that is incredible. Rarely have I come across any community members who want to read what is likely going to be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages, which it frequently is. I would just ask that you please put it on the website or make it accessible for the public to use. And if there is data points that you're investigating, I would love to see it. Hey, this is where it is applied in certain strategies or certain things the city's doing. Why does it matter? I think that's an important part of the data analysis process. I'd also really applaud the implementation mechanism that you guys did. Comprehensive plans of the past do not have implementation mechanisms. They have goals, objectives, and policies. And so the fact that we're doing this is incredible. Some of the more progressive communities, and I'm talking about, you know, major cities here, because this is a feat to ask of your staff. Let me be clear, but having those implementation trackers online so people can see in real time, this is what we're working on, this is where we are. Have we started? This is where we're at in the process. Have we gotten this indicator done, and are we finished? I think is a huge step towards public transparency and making sure that the plan is actually implemented. I just wanted to make one final note. So I've been hearing a lot about public engagement, and it sounds like maybe we need to do some things differently. Maybe we need to do more, and I think everyone in this room probably agrees. But I can assure you, for comprehensive planning, the ones that I've worked on, and the best practices that we, frankly, as planners take from, that's kind of one of the ways we get better as a planning profession. They don't do things like community liaisons and meeting in a box. That's very progressive. And good for you as a community for deciding that's important. Oftentimes it's just 3 public workshops and we're done. Thanks for coming to the meetings and that's it. The fact that we are doing these other supplemental things should be commended. It sounds like we need to do more. I understand that. But it is very frustrating for me to hear that we're not doing anything at all. Because I think that should be applauded and should be recognized of your staff, which I understand is not that large. That's pretty incredible. And that we're not just satisfied with 3 public meetings and moving on. We're working as a community, we're outreaching to the right folks, we're trying to do more outreach, and just thank you for doing that, and please be encouraged to do even more. And so I'll get off my soapbox. Thank you for allowing me to comment.
Thank you. I think this is Commissioner Chestnut.
Thank you so much for your comments. Very informative. We have a very, very progressive staff, and they have taken great measures in trying to involve the public. But I think we need to take community engagement one step further and think outside the box in terms of community engagement. We have different people at the table now who weren't here last year. But they came to the table because of they got involved on exclusionary zoning. And by golly, they've been here every week since then. They're always on the spot here to help us and to share their viewpoint. So I think if we can think outside the box in terms of community engagement and going back to those communities and fully engaging them so that we get the input. And yes, Gainesville is a community that likes a lot of community engagement. That's one of the things that I've always enjoyed about living here. And as a politician, it's just the best of both worlds because you're always going to have citizens willing to listen to you and to have you involved. One thing that I have stressed as a commissioner is looking at a profile of boards when we make appointments. And the reason I do that is because I'm looking for exactly what Ms. Carrie Parker Warren said. I'm looking to make sure that the boards reflect this community. And she's correct. There is no reason that the plan board should not reflect the diversity of the community when the decisions we make are having long-term impact, having a long-term impact on housing, on single-family housing, on how we live. The issue we met on last week will be on the agenda Thursday, one of them, so you may want to show up. But I think that we've got the citizens in East Gainesville are awake and ready to be involved, and they're going to stay involved. We just have to keep them at the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Chestnut. And I think it's Commissioner Willits, right?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Mr. Eggleton, for everything you've been leading your staff with. This has been just remarkable to see how this is stretched over years through different types of outreach. And to Mr. Hill's point, this is truly progressive that the city looked and went deeper kind of than other communities do. I want to echo some of what Commissioner Chestnut said, is that, yeah, I would love our boards and our plan board and the participation to reflect our community. And we are a community that rents 60%. And when we pretend like it isn't, it is harmful, divisive, it is, I'm going to say, immoral when we pretend that we are a community that does not rent. 60% roughly, and it's sometimes hard to determine the rental rates because is it the housing or the people who live in it. But we're talking about a majority of a community that rents. And in my district, overwhelmingly majority. And in my district, it's an overwhelmingly majority that not just rents, but lives in apartments of some sort. Big, small, duplexes, lots of small townhouses, like I do. So I welcome on the commission there being 60% renters, on the plan board, on every board. Only because of COVID did I stop being a renter. You know, I spent 38 years being a renter, 39 years being a renter of my life. Or let's say 20 years as an adult. So I welcome it, I welcome it. My first question is boring. It doesn't have to be answered now, but if staff could help us. Is the city of Gainesville allowed to have a potable water and wastewater element? Mr. Attorney?
They just said yes.
Still, we are still allowed, because it's not direct direction to GRU about potable water, any kind of goal?
Yes, you can have that element on your contract.
Okay, because I've been told that we are not allowed to direct GRU to do anything, and the word GRU exists in our current comp plan under potable water. So that's a boring question. As I've understood about how we're going to operationalize equity, that this is truly groundbreaking. The fact that we're willing to look at this in a world where people are pushing back and say, "Oh, everything needs to be race blind," and it sounds like my experience, what little I know about the planning process, much of it is just completely race blind. Let's provide housing. Let's do this. Let's have people within X distance of parks. But when you go to do the measurement, you just look at a measure and say, "Oh, well, we're doing pretty good. 80% of people live this far away. 80% of people have this type of housing, or a health statistic. Oh yeah, we're at 95%. Yay, good. 95% vaccination rate. Whatever it is, it's a race-blind look. And for me, the example I took, since my whole adult life has been during No Child Left Behind, No Child Left Behind said, no, you can't just look at the data and say, oh, 95% of your kids are doing whatever. You have to go in and look at the subgroups. And that's where you start to dig into equity. And so that's, as I understand, coming in relatively new, that the city has been looking at this and how we bring in equity, operationalize it everywhere, but particularly in our comp plan, that we look that race is a part of it. And so I'm excited that we're going to do that. And as I understand, a lot of these is that we're going to actually be able to look at outcomes. And the thing that recently happened that is not exactly in Imagine GNV, but when we looked at the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs Needs Assessment update to the Parks Master Plan, one of the things partially pushed, I know I was pushing about data about Southwest Gainesville, but when we looked at that, they did analysis to see how far away these parks are, because we have the goal of walking distance of 10 minutes for everybody to a park. It's a very, very good goal. It's going to be very hard to reach. But we looked at least by census blocks, how close are these people? Are people in Gainesville? And of course, it identified a need in Southwest Gainesville. That's why I was pushing for it. Because my eyes told me something, but I needed some data. But beyond that, because of the census tract, we could look at race. And so we saw in my district, our black neighbors are further away from parks than they are in other districts. And so that was my first little inkling that what we are doing can be really helpful for us to understand and to give that 35,000 foot, what are our goals? I understand that it's going to, the amount of data we will need is impressive. We will never have enough. It shouldn't hold us back. I don't think we need every single bit of data to know that we have inequities that we can address and we can start. And that's why I like the Imagine GNV program, this plan, that it's not everything, but it's how we want to go forward. And so the parks thing, that was a way for me to understand how we need to look at some of those, that we need to achieve things. Where you place a park changes the data for how close black neighbors are to their closest park, or renters, or whatever, because we know people aren't spaced out equally over a city. So I'm really excited about all of this. I think I had a question about, well, maybe this isn't a question. It's about the Live Local Act, and this is a good example of where how we look now. It's going to, or rather, new things that have happened in the past 3 years while we've been looking at this update are affecting it. Because I asked a question a couple meetings ago about whether the Live Local Act, do we think it's going to impact how, or I was afraid that we would make individual decisions on land use or zoning with fear that members of our community won't want anything changed because of the impacts of the Live Local Act. I was talking more about the 1 mile away maximum zoning, but this is an example, as Mr. Hill mentioned, is that if we say we want jobs and good jobs, and we use Ocala as an example of perhaps more affordable housing with perhaps some more blue-collar jobs or middle-class jobs, well, how do we get industrial land should we decide we want it? Should we decide, that's not my opinion, when that may trigger people in the community to say, oh no industrial land, because if someone who owns that land promises affordable housing on it, we can't control that affordable housing gets built there. And so I appreciate his astute observation of that, because I've been thinking about the Live Local Act on a slightly different angle. So I really appreciate that. And thank you, Mr. Ackerman, for bringing us back to the data of the HRNA report. Sometimes that data is there, we read it, our experts told us stuff. Whether we take that and move forward, that's on us. So I'm excited I'm really excited about the commitment to achieve the goals, to look at the data and attempt to have outcomes on it, rather than just say, we like parks, we like trails, we like conservation lands. What is the data? What does that tell us? We do some of that. The Parks and Rec data felt good about this is how many acres of land per capita we have in conservation, and compare it to other communities from their set goals. So I'm really excited, and I'm excited for even more feedback from the community about this. And I think this, because we lay it out in chapters in a much more colorful format, I think more people are going to interact in it, definitely as we roll it out. I don't know all those plans, but I suspect we have a better document to roll out. I would read that. Bright colors, I would read that. I have read the whole plan, the existing plan, and it's hard to get through sometimes. Elements, it sounds like science, but I appreciate that commissions before me and staff before me and before all of us started working on this, and this has been a long process, perhaps truncated by the pandemic, but we're still here and we're still doing this, perhaps with even greater emphasis because of particularly a housing crisis. But outside of that, we have everything else. We have environment, we got parks, we have access to health care, and that's included. So I think when people are like, what is this plan going to do for us? Well, what do you think the last plan did? And the reason why you probably have never heard there was a plan is it's called the Comprehensive Plan, not Imagine GNV, and it looks like the way it looks. So I'm hoping this is an opportunity for people to really engage and understand what it does, and then to be able to refer back to it, and particularly to be able to hold us accountable to it. Because sometimes I think people are shocked by what is in our comprehensive plan, and they say, what do you mean? What do you mean Gainesville believes we should have a diversity of housing? I'm saying it. Comp plan started there. And it's there multiple times. I'm not making this up. I may be new, but I didn't make that up. I'm not making it up. So go look at your comp plan, but in this case, hopefully we have a better document. Thank you, Chair Ackerman. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Willits. I think this is Mr. Sanchez.
I just wanted to give Mr. Edelton and the staff an opportunity to tell the community that's here how they can continue to engage with this process. I think you said that I know there's a website. I think you said that feedback is ongoing. We've talked a lot about community engagement, but I feel like we haven't told people how to actually do it. So if you could come up and just tell people how they can engage, if it's a website, if we could put the website up on the display there so that people know the URL so that they can take that with them when they go home and they're able to, because I know it's on the website, I've read it on the website, so I want other people to know this too.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, I think probably the easiest way for most people is through that website or giving comments there. The URL for that is actually complicated because it's pretty deep in the city's website. Can you? But if you search the planning department in the city of Gainesville, that should show up.
Isn't it just imaginegnv.conevio.com?
It's .org. imaginegnv.org.
Okay, that's way easier.
There you go.
That is too complicated for this. I can't work with it. I'm sorry.
I didn't want to get sucked into spelling out conveyo.
So is that the only way?
No, so of course also you can call our department. We always have a planner of the day that is on duty that answers the phone calls, that is happy to take down any of the comments or feedback that then of course we'll get to our core team on this. If there are specific elements or items, I would definitely start reaching out to the planning team about those. But if it has something more to do with, say, public works or something like that, the planning staff will still help get people to our staff that can answer some of those questions. So even if people think that they have questions about, roadways or things like that that are normally steered towards a different department, if they have a question about the comprehensive plan, they can come to the planning staff. So happy to leave our cards and our contact information here for those that are in the audience. Several have our direct contact and information already. But I think those are the two best ways. Of course, come to the Thomas Center. It's very nice. Chinch bugs work out on a regular basis, so yes. Thank you.
If I might, Mr. Mayor, Chairman. The Communications Department, I was not here when the community engagement took place in 2021, but I do know that the Communications Department was very involved in that. In fact, they hired somebody, Ann Wolf, who engaged particularly to do this. I would say that the Communications Department will ramp up again before this plan reaches completion to make sure that we do one more sweep of a complete community engagement, and definitely up to Azalea Trails.
Thank you.
And certainly the follow-ups for the next stages of that comp plan draft will come before you all. And then, of course, conversation about that implementation document and strategy is going to be ongoing always to try to achieve that plan. So there will be constant opportunities and iterations to make it better.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. Commissioner Chestnut, did you? Okay. All right. Dr. Marmer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I want to say everything that I've heard from this dais since member comment began, I agree with. And I want to reiterate to staff my thankfulness of all the work you've done on engagement. But I did have one note on how to improve engagement here, because this is an iterative process. I know Mayor Ward had mentioned several times that the engagement process is not, or the engagement stage is not over. We can still incorporate feedback. There I actually had two notes on that. I think it might be good to consider a targeted canvas. And you can think of this sort of as a canvassing for conversations. So not just a educational outreach where you're talking to people, but where you are explaining the very basics of what a comprehensive plan is, and then asking for what they want to see. And be very open-ended, and it should be targeted, especially in neighborhoods like Azalea Trails, Lincoln Estates, apartment communities like Carver Gardens, Southwest Gainesville, in Commissioner Willitz's district, would also be a good place. There's several places down at the very edge of the city. I think part of Lincoln Oaks is in the city, if I'm not mistaken. You have Phoenix, right? So this is a way that you can incorporate, this is a way you can get feedback and engagement from renters as well as our Black community, right? Targeted canvassing. Additionally, I think it would be good to think about having focus groups, right? The people who come to city commission meetings and county commission meetings and plan board meetings are not your average people. So it's there's several ways that we can reach the average person. I'm a community organizer. So one of the things that we do is we try to randomly select people, right? We pick people to randomly speak to and get their feedback. So I think that that should maybe be incorporated into the engagement. I don't know if it's appropriate to ask about whether anything like a focus group has occurred yet, or
we did have similar things to that. They weren't random, but we some of the, and I can't remember the names that were used on it, but some of the meetings that were held in homes and things like that, it's similar. It's not randomized, but yeah.
Yeah. I think the randomization is very important, though, to if you're really trying to get at like the average person. I'm trying not to use statistical terms, so forgive me if I'm struggling. So that's my comment about engagement, but I think it's really important, and we really do need to focus on Southwest Gainesville and on Southeast Gainesville, especially Lincoln Estates and Azalea Trails. As far as the plan's substance goes, Mr. Hall had brought up a good point about industrial use zoning and what we do about that in light of the Live Local Act. And I want to reiterate how big of a concern this is for our economy and for our workers. So we lost fracture to Alachua, and I knew several employees there who quit because they just could not do the commute. Not all of them had cars. Fracture had claimed that they had left the city of Gainesville because they could not expand. They did not have the space. So that definitely needs to, I think, be incorporated into the comprehensive plan, Teledyne, which is a very small manufacturer that, well, in town they're small, that is working on research and development and also manufacturing drones. They have just announced that they're laying off the remainder of their workforce, in part because we don't have the space to expand their R&D center and their manufacturing. If we want to have a strong manufacturing sector, or even if we want it to be as strong as it was a couple of years ago when we had Philips, we really need to focus on this. These are good jobs, and I think our residents deserve them. And this is something that I don't hear talked about enough. But manufacturing flight due to lack of space to expand facilities. So I guess if there was a question with that, it would be like, what kind of work has been done so far in incorporating industrial and manufacturing needs into the plan? Thank you.
Thank you.
So, thank you. Yeah, yes, you're right. That's, of course, an important part of the planning for the land use for this comprehensive plan. And of course, that land use is normally in the land use element. It's its own sort of chapter, but you are, of course, again, asking questions that if we're answering these or addressing these appropriately, it's beyond just that land use question. But to focus on that for, to start off. So we have identified, again, we being the city and staff, that there is that need for more industrial land and for industrial uses. And we have commissioned that ULI report that spoke to the airport industrial park that really talked about how, in effect, we're built out there. So if it is something that our neighbors, that the city commission decides is something that's important for us to address, providing these jobs, if having additional industrial area or land use provides the types of jobs that the commission is interested in, then that is something that we will be able to point to the comprehensive plan to say, this is why we're making this land use decision, or this is why we're making this annexation decision that then is also changing that land use to industrial land use. This is why we are deciding that new industrial areas should be in this location versus this location. So that is really where all of that kind of sort of meat is going to be more in that implementation strategy area, and that conversation and really overarching decision level really comes more from that comprehensive plan and is something that can be referred back to.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, I think this is Mr. Nay.
Thank you, Mayor and Plan Board members and other commissioners. My name is Joshua Nay. I live in East Gainesville. I've lived there for 20 years. My wife was a teacher at Rawlings. One of my big questions is, the state seems to be really going into home rule and wants to get rid of it, and it doesn't like equity even as a concept. Do we think that they're going to let us pass this if we have equity all over it?
This one that there's two elements to this, of course. That there are the legal requirements of comprehensive planning, as we've said, from the state statute. But then, of course, as we have also talked about, that there are those political concerns and considerations. What we can do from staff is make sure that we are addressing those requirements from state statute, which is really what the state is limited to responding to about their, either criticism, approval, or rejection of what we submit. And really that other political element of it, we have to think about this body, this group of people, and our neighbors, and what their wants are and their politics are. And, obviously we're aware of what goes on at the state level, but for us planning for our city and our community and how we incorporate that into our comprehensive plan, we really have to leave that to you guys, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. But we do feel comfortable as staff that we're meeting those statutory requirements. And then so technically the state's response to that is limited to those statutory requirements. And I might be getting out in front of my skis here for my city attorney's office, but they're shaking their head. Seems all right.
Sounds good. And the only other thing I really appreciate, some of the other commissioners brought up, renters. You know, we're a city of renters. We need to make sure that we hear their voices. We also are majority young people, like the median age is 26. I don't see a lot of 26-year-olds out there in the audience tonight. We have to remember we listen to those people. They live here, they work here, and they contribute. So, thank you.
Thank you. So I do want to respond quickly to the equity question, because that's a real thing. I mean, it's not a legal thing, it's a political thing. But the onus then goes to the plan board and the commission to pay attention to this guiding document that says we're supposed to be paying attention to equity. And a lot of what this is not zoning categories, but where we put infrastructure. Where do we build roads? What kind of roads do we build when we build roads? Who builds those roads? Where do we put stormwater structures? How do we move the water to those stormwater structures? Those things are things that speak directly to equity. Because in the past, it's been, if we were having this conversation 70 years ago, we would have said, as they said then, we'll just put those in Southeast Gainesville. Put the things that nobody wants in Southeast Gainesville. That's what they said over and over. Now, what this can tell us, again, we focus a lot on this being about zoning, but it's about other decisions than that. This guiding document tells us, hey, when you put that stormwater retention pond somewhere, make sure that it isn't getting, that it's not just being put somewhere because you can put it there. Put it somewhere that makes sense, where it serves a population, but doesn't exclude a population and move some group of people out of the way to do that. So the legal parts of this that have to go to Tallahassee, yeah, we're gonna have to be careful how those are termed. And we'll use the legal terminology for that. But the parts that speak to commissions and plan boards for the next decade in Gainesville can speak very directly about what we're trying to achieve here. And it's easy to forget that's as much what this is about as it is where we put the next housing development or the next apartment complex. It's also where we create the opportunity for that, or the lack of opportunity for that, by how we make infrastructure decisions. So I think that speaks to what you're talking about to some degree. But okay, all right. Number one, and I'm not sure is that Ms. Bell again? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, could someone more tenured than me explain the Live Local Act just in general, since it's so new and maybe a lot of folks haven't heard about it or don't know what exactly that entails?
I think we can make a stab at it, but the problem with it at this point is nobody's entirely sure exactly what it all
Oh, cool.
means.
Perfect.
Did someone from planning want to come take a quick shot at it, or someone from the attorney's office too? I mean, that'd be all right.
The attorney looks really excited to explain it. Like, whew.
Under the table.
All right, I'll try to take a stab at it. Again, Brittany McMullen, I'm a planner at the Planning Department. So the Live Local Act is something that went into effect on July 1st, so it's still very new. It is a state law that basically preempts local governments, cities and counties from not allowing for basically saying no to developments that have a certain percentage of affordable housing units. Affordable being a level that's defined as 120% of AMI of a community. So, arguable as to what level of affordability it's really gonna get to, and how affordable it's really gonna be. But So it kind of does three different things. One of the things is it says if you build a development with at least, I think it's 40% of units at this level of AMI, you can utilize the highest density within the city, period, wherever you are. So it provides developers who are putting those types of units in at that level the ability to build higher density. It also says you can use I believe it's the highest available number of stories within 1 mile of where the property is located.
So this is the Senate bill that changed height restrictions.
Yes, it's a state.
Among other things, but that's like one of the biggest changes, that it like kind of takes away home rule height restrictions. Oversimplifying,
That's one of the big
but
things it
yeah.
does, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that basically is what it does. But I do want to clarify that it does not apply to residential zoning districts. So it does not apply to properties that are currently zoned residential. What it applies to are properties that are zoned commercial, mixed use, or industrial. And that's why the conversation with industrial has been coming up a lot, because what it would allow, that's not currently allowed in, well, I guess it wasn't allowed previously prior to July 1st. Generally, cities in Florida in industrial zoning districts, industrial land uses, do not allow residential to mix in with that industrial. So that is one of the kind of big unknowns, is how are cities going to really regulate residential uses in industrial areas, because they historically haven't been allowed to kind of commingle. So that's just one of the things that's come up. But it does have to do with allowing higher density and allowing more height than what would previously be allowed. It's not going to impact single-family zoned neighborhoods, though. So that's important, I think.
You're welcome. Go ahead, Mr. Edelton.
Something just to add on to that, what we're hearing so far from both the development and real estate community is that they're not sure how this is going to come into play. So if you're trying to value an industrial property for an industrial use, you know what you're doing. If you're trying to value it for your multifamily use, you know what you're doing. But if it's an industrial property where now you're trying to sell it to multiple different users or end users, then that is unclear at this point for how that's going to play out in the market.
Very good, thank you. So I would also point out that we have a situation here in Gainesville where there's an industrial zoning across the street from a historic and historically black neighborhood in Porter's. We've been making cement across the street from Porter's for 100 years or so, for a very long time. I'll say that. I don't know exactly when the cement plant was built, but it's been that way for a long time. We've had some very preliminary discussions about the idea of having a community conversation about what that industrial corridor on South Main will look like, because we ought to decide as a community what that ought to all be. And stay tuned for more on that, I will say. I think this is Commissioner Eastman.
That's correct. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just wanted to thank staff for all of the hard work you put into this. I know I've been hearing about this comprehensive plan for many, many years. I know that you all have worked on it, and I appreciate everyone that's coming out. And I know it's kind of a hard thing to wrap your head around, just because it is land use and planning and zoning is already kind of a wonky, in the weeds type of policy decision, and this is now long-term planning for land use and zoning and planning and how we go forward. But I think there's something really powerful about ensuring that race and equity is so central in all of this. Is Mayor Ward alluded to, race and equity have always been a part of our land use and zoning. Not necessarily in the direction that we are trying to go in as a city now. We have when you look at the early decisions that were made as to why certain zones would be created, why certain land uses would be created, it was not necessarily for the benefit of everyone. It was to ensure that some people would be forced into areas that no one else wanted to live in, to ensure that that certain people had a good life while other people did not. And for us to put from the direction of our land use and zoning, that same profession now taking that and saying, we're going to take this and we're going to use these same tools to try to move into a better direction, I think is a powerful statement, even if it is from the 100,000-foot level. Moving back down into the kind of the community engagement and how we move forward, I think Dr. Tanzer made a really good point earlier about, and I've seen this a lot with our community engagement, how you can kind of split it up into two different levels. There's the gathering of local knowledge and then giving feedback on something that is in front of you that you have. And a lot of this has been done on the sort of the gathering side of the equation, which I know it's hard for me if someone comes to me and says, what should be in a comprehensive plan document? I'll say, well, I mean, what should be in a comprehensive plan document? It gets to be kind of wonky as you're at that level. And so I do think it's important that we kind of circle back around, start having, some time that we're communicating with people on an actual physical thing that is in front of them. I find that is what works best for me. I think that's what works best for the community. That's how I try to do it. That's why, I mean, you've seen me come forward with different proposals on zoning and things like that so that people have something in front of them that they can, give feedback as whether they're opposed, whether they like it, whether there'd be certain changes to it. I think it's a better, just a better solution all around. And so I hope that we'll have a couple of those before we submit this to the state and before we come forward. But overall, I really like what we've done with it. It's a fairly simple resolution just to make race and equity a foundation, integrating it into the other core values that are included within the comprehensive plan. And from that, this whole kind of process has been spun to collect data to figure out how we can do things better to integrate the rest of the city into it. I really applaud staff and everyone who's put so much time in the plan board members who have put so much work into this. I think it's a very good work, and I look forward to seeing it as it continues forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Eastman. I think this is Mr. Sanchez.
So I can't believe we've gotten this far in the night and haven't talked about the other way the state is preempting things in Gainesville, and that's GRU, which I believe comes up, I did a search in this document, 43 times in this plan, Imagine GNV. Mr. Edelton and staff, how bad does losing control of GRU affect, like how much does that affect the plan? I would imagine that it affects Section 7, the environment, quite a bit, because there's a lot of specific call-outs for GRU goals in there. With the city no longer having control over GRU, are you guys going to take time to sort of rework that or jiggle that in some way?
I think it is something that we are looking at to see what needs to be updated, changed based off of that. But you're right, it will affect the way, of course, that we can really have that incorporated into the comprehensive plan.
Is there any thought to a change in the timeline, because that's a kind of, it seems like a big part of the
Not really from what we've presented tonight, that we intend to have really that large part finished by the end of the year, adopted and reviewed and everything by the end of that late March.
Okay.
Very good. Okay, I'm not sure who number 3 is down there. Okay, Commissioner Buck.
I know we're doubling up on the lights here, Mr. Mayor and Chair Ackerman, so I appreciate that. And my intent tonight was simply to listen and hear, since we have a joint meeting, we had the benefit of really hearing diverse opinions, which probably makes the plan stronger in the long run. So that's the first and most important thing, and probably the biggest benefit, at least for me. I do agree that the plan, and thanks for reading that, the plan is extremely visually appealing, which is terrific because that means it's more intuitive and it's more user-friendly. So that's a tremendous aspect of anything from an engagement standpoint. Where I think we want to make sure that we're extremely tight and we deal with this thing that you might have alluded to called legal sufficiency, is make sure that every aspect of this plan from a direction standpoint has indexing to what the specific aspects are on the government bureaucratic side. So if it's 3.10 and that deals with affordable housing, that's a point. Then anyone who may not be very versed, like a planner, or an architect or a builder or a developer, will need to be quickly able to find what's the index for that piece and where is it in Imagine GNV. Because if you do that, then it both benefits the community, but also allows us to help all the people that are following through on the plan and implementing the plan, the ability to do that and navigate much quicker. And that's also a component of good government. So the document does still need to be bureaucratic. And the bureaucratic piece is anyone can find and navigate what the pieces of the plan are. So that's pretty important. I would hope that we're able to do on this engagement thing that virtually, it seems that if there was one unanimous piece amongst both the folks who are speaking to us and everybody up here at this very crowded dais, it's that the engagement, we probably need to refresh our engagement. And that's because our last engagement, while it was, Mr. Mayor, you're right, it was comprehensive and it involved a lot of hours, a lot of time. It's not very recent. And things do change. Things change based on, things like affordable housing and aspects of the pandemic, which change the manner in which we move and communicate. So we are going to need to refresh that, and I leave that really to, I do believe that the items that the staff have taken and the work that the staff has done is tremendous here, so I really appreciate that. But ways to refresh that will be going where people are. I like what both Commissioner Eastman and Dr. Murmer said, which is information gathering is one, and getting out in the faith-based community and going to our updated list of what's going to be 30-something neighborhood associations and kicking out information proactively will be a key way and say, here's what we have, here's where we're at, here's our timeline, what's left, what do you see? And if that means that we have to get out those face-to-face, we do need to do that also. So I think that's a key piece. And then just lastly, on the state review process, Mr. Edelton, just tell me a little bit about what that's going to mean. Are we going to send a draft document and then we're going to talk informally? Is there going to be a written review back? Talk to a little bit about that state review process.
So we have started reaching out to the state staff that would do this, just to let them know, give them this broad level heads up that we're planning on doing something, this different, essentially. So we've taken that initial step. The formal step is for us to submit it once adopted from you all by that first reading, get that feedback from the state, come back to you all for that second one, and then submit it again back to the state for that final.
All right, that's helpful. So to the extent that we have informal networks. Good. To the extent that we have informal networks of communication, those are best to do now. Mm-hmm. And reach out and communicate and say, what do you see? What kind of time can you give us? What can you review? What may meet criteria? What makes us nervous before we end up submitting it, whatever the timeline is in 2024? We need to really maximize that because there has been so much new legislation that we don't want to run afoul of it. No matter what we may think, we do have to have that legal sufficiency, and we'd be much better off getting the feedback based on our networks now to know that so when we submit it, it's going to come back with a written report that says, tweak this, amend this, where is these particular items, that's typically response. But as far as the sufficiency and that we like the plan, that's what we're going to want to see in that first written background. So that leads me to the last point, which is we do need to test the plan now. Testing the plan is something like has been alluded to regarding terminology. So if we have a term like center, which has come up several times, ask 10 people, what does it mean? And if we get 10 different views of what center means, we have a problem with that term. That's any terminology in there that may not be clear, because for it to be intuitive, it's going to have to be clear. It's going to have clarity. And the other way we can test the plan is when we go to neighborhoods and we indicate how this could be implemented, say this is how it would be implemented, and get the feedback on that. So those are just a couple of long-winded comments and thoughts about the plan, but I do appreciate the work, and I really appreciate Chair Ackerman and Mr. Mayor getting us together collectively, which has been helpful for me, and I'm certain helpful for others. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Willits.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The GRU pieces, I mentioned a very specific element, and I was perhaps typing it sarcastically, but I'm serious, like Mr. Sanchez, about GRU is mentioned, did you say 43 times?
That's what I saw, 43 times.
By a quick search, about how because my understanding is this is a legally binding document. This is not a mere suggestion of what we would prefer our utility to do. And though most of this is not, well, I mean, the water is what I picked out because this isn't so much about electricity necessarily, but it is. It's all throughout there. I have concerns about sending this through and us being unfortunately shocked that the people who review this are absolutely in tune with the bill that was passed. And so I want us to, I personally want to know exactly what the interpretation of the law is in comparison to comprehensive plans. Because I know that's not something I thought of 6 months ago, but as we've been peeling back the layers of the onion, that is the city with GRU, those have come up. So it's something I hope staff, even if they will just inform me where we really think we are on that. Because if we have to spend more time on the GRU piece than other outreach, I want to make sure that gets planned in, and we're not scrambling at the end on October 4th when a new authority board, I don't know, says we don't like that GRU is mentioned at all in your comp plan. So that's just a concern I want us to approach well in advance. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. So I would say that as it relates to utilities, let's take some for instances in other places, and if the attorney will tell me I'm off base here, that's okay. But it seems to me that cities like West Palm Beach that don't have a utility, a municipal utility, where Florida Power and Light is in their community, they still have a comprehensive plan, and it still references utilities. We can't direct GRU to do things, but we can direct whomever the utility might be in this plan. We have to, in our comprehensive plan, we have to reference utilities. I mean, that's required by statute to do that. You can't have a comprehensive plan that doesn't talk about potable water and a variety of other things. So not only can we, but we must. How do we term it might be an issue, I'm guessing. Instead of saying GRU will do this, we might have to be more oblique than that. But yeah, we are required to have a comprehensive plan. It's required to have elements that refer to utilities, and other communities who do not own their utility. I mean, the city of West Palm Beach certainly can't can't write policy for FP&L, but they can certainly talk about how utilities will work in their community through their comprehensive plan. And I think that's what this comes back to. If this is going to be treated as a separate entity, then we can treat it as a separate entity. We just, it will require some different terminology. And I may be totally off base with that, but that's just how I've been thinking about this. Since the statute requires us to deal with it, we're going to have to deal with it, which creates a whole other concern there, I suppose. But that's also why this is in court. So, Commissioner Eastman, or is that Commissioner? That's Mr. Burmer, Dr. Burmer. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I wanted to give a direct response to what you had just said. When you first started talking about West Palm Beach, and I was thinking cities that
have Duke or Florida Power and Light, I was kind of with you. But in most instances, I'm not aware of any major city, certainly not the size of Gainesville, that does not control its own water utility. So I think Commissioner Willits was specifically referring to the water part, not the electric part. So I think it would be helpful to have staff let us know if they've thought about this, or let us know what needs to be done to get a handle on what we can do with the plan, since we don't control our water provider.
So I agree with that, but I still think you treat it like every other utility. I mean, you treat it like you would an electric utility. So it's a separate organization within the community. But yeah, we will learn. We will find out, and we'll have more input as we go. Ms. Sutton.
So just building off that, and I think staff, may very well do the same thing I just did and look at what does Alachua County do, right? Because the majority served by GRU, they have a potable water and sanitary sewer element. They also have an energy element, and they have
people within Alachua County, not only served by GRU Electric, but Clay Electric and other things. So there are definitely ways to handle that in the comp plan. I think the way that GRU is addressed currently might need to be changed. I was actually one of the people early on that pushed you because we were setting energy goals in the environment element, and I said, hey, has anybody talked to GRU about this? And you said, well, no, not really. And I said, well, go talk to GRU. They're the energy provider. Don't set goals without involving them. So I'm probably responsible for some of those references in the latest version because I pushed to actually involve the people producing the energy. But I think that there's a way to do it. I think one place that actually we haven't talked about, and it may actually have more of an impact, is with the capital improvement element, which we haven't seen or talked about really, but I believe we're required by the state to have some element of a capital improvement element. And we've had a policy, most places have a policy to sort of dig once, right? So if you're updating a roadway, you update the water main under the roadway at the same time. And so there's some significant coordination required to do your capital improvements element in the most effective way that it can be done. I think that's where we're probably going to have more challenges than in the environment section and things like that. It may just need to be made more broad, but we haven't seen how we're doing the capital improvements yet, and I think you all may need to think differently about that piece in particular, given the GRU circumstances.
Thank you, Member Sutton. Don't see any other lights, so, and this is a workshop, so we're not looking for motions or anything. So I will thank everyone for being here. I thank staff, top to bottom, for the enormous amount of effort that has gone into this so far. And remind everyone that we are in draft format and that we are not done, and there will be more. And I'm sure staff has heard our discussion this evening. And if you're watching at home on television or you're here in the auditorium and you want to give folks more opportunity for input, you've heard some ways that is immediately possible. And certainly I would encourage anyone to read what's up on the website and become familiar with this and reach out to planning board members and to commission members. That's mostly what engagement is reaching out when you know there's something you're concerned with. We are very accessible. There are communities where that's not the case. We are very accessible. And I'm sure that most of us, if not all of us, are able to make time to meet with folks and groups of folks. So take advantage of that. And we'll be reaching out more proactively as well to reach some folks who perhaps were not reached to begin with. But there's going to be a time when we have to, the phrase fish or cut bait, and it cannot be an endless series of outreach meetings. We will not achieve perfection, but there's going to be a point at which we have to say we have done everything that can be done to move forward, and we'll have to move forward at that point. I can't tell you exactly what that date is right now because we want to do more. But there will be a point at which we say this has to move forward because the existing plan won't live forever, and there is a point at which we'll need to decide that what we have is what we can accomplish and make it happen. So there we are. I want to thank everyone for your attention on this topic. And Madam Clerk.
We have member comment.
Okay. Member comment? I see no further lights. So thank you all very much, Commissioners. I will see you at the MTPO tomorrow.